Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving your time this evening. I'm going to keep this to an hour, but I'm going to leave 15 minutes at the end for chat and discussion. But please interact in between if you've got any questions. I'm Steve Denby. I'm a health coach. I started life off, professional life off as a personal trainer many years ago, about 30 years ago. As an exercise therapist. And I kind of apologize to all of my clients sort of 25 years ago, because when it came to the nutrition side, we were giving out the wrong advice then. I'm going to touch on that today. Now I am a coach still. I still have some PT, but I really thrive and specialize in the mental health and emotional health and well-being side of wellness. And nutrition plays a huge role in mental wellness and overall physical wellness. It is actually key, to be honest. And I'm going to be talking today about diabetes because I am a diabetic. And there's a journey on this and how this all came about. And so I want to share it with you. And hopefully give you all some insight into what it is to be a diabetic, how to manage diabetes type 2 and pre-diabetes, and actually pre-diabetes, which I think that there's probably one in three of us are pre-diabetic. And actually that alarm, can you hear that alarm? That is my glucose alarm going off, and my glucose level right now is too high because I've just had spaghetti bolognese, so my insulin hasn't kicked in on it yet. But I'm going to be talking about that as well, because I believe that the management of type 1 diabetes and type 2, and what people understand, is a little obscure. I think it's not as helpful as it should be. Okay, so I'm going to show you this, and I want you to take note of it because it is part of the story. This is a number plate that I acquired just after lockdown. I bought a new car, and this was the number plate on the car. Can you all see that? Can you see that or not?
Yes, H1, yeah.
I'd like you to just write it down. If you can see it, I'll say it out, but it's H19CBA. So I got this, I got that number plate 2 years, no, a year and a half before I was diagnosed, and actually misdiagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Hence, it leads me down this road. So when we are mismanaging our glucose levels, we don't know. We don't have a dial, right? We don't have a reader that tells us what our glucose levels are at the time. We can only tell through symptoms, and actually not all of us would even recognize those symptoms. So so when the glucose levels are too high in the body, the symptoms are tiredness, kind of memory loss, and sort of kind of a sense of being there and present but not being miles away. Headaches, and thirsty. You can also have general aches and pains in the body when glucose is too high. And then when this occurs for long periods of time, we effectively get sticky blood. Yeah. So the sugar sticks to the red blood cells, and that's long term causes the damage to arteries, leading to potential heart damage, and multiple problems related to vessel issues and inflammation in the body, all through high levels of sugar or sustained high levels of sugar. So, but we all have something that naturally kicks in to help us control that blood sugar, and it's insulin. And insulin is released by a hormonal trigger, and the message is sent to the pancreas to release insulin, and it dumps insulin into the system, into the bloodstream, which mobilizes and moves the glucose and pushes it through to the cells and the muscles and the working system. And that's how it normally operates. So we eat and we release insulin, and that happens automatically without our thoughts whatsoever, without us doing anything. That happens. Now, when we have diabetes, we have a situation where we either have insulin resistance or we do not produce insulin at all in any way. And that when we don't produce insulin, when a pancreas does not release insulin, that is type 1 diabetes. Yeah. And when our pancreas is still working properly and we release insulin, but we have resistance to that, that is type 2 diabetes. And that happens over a long period of time where we're literally dumping excessive sugar, glucose into the body, and effectively the insulin becomes resistant. It becomes ineffective over a long period of time. So we can manage type 2 diabetes with the correct diet and exercise. So it is my opinion and experience that you can reverse type 2 diabetes and you can manage it. But you can't reverse type 1. But you can manage type 1 diabetes more effectively than the current methodology of doing so, in my opinion and experience. So all through my life, I've been hangry. And has anybody experienced what it's like being hangry? Any just raise hands. Does anybody know what I mean by being hangry? Yeah, and it's being hangry is hypoglycemia. When you're in a hypoglycemic state, when the glucose level is depleted and you haven't eaten and you get moody. And this is really simple. We're talking about glucose, energy generated to the brain, and you're not functioning, you're shutting down. So the stages of being hangry or being hypoglycemic are, first of all, you kind of get a little bit ratty and moody because your stress level increases and you're in a fight or flight situation. I don't know if you've ever known when you're in a fight or flight situation and you feel anxious, you can actually feel a little bit more aggressive and angry as well. Never argue with anybody in a hypo or in an angry state because their prefrontal cortex is switching off and dumbing down, and they're going into fight or flight mode through the neural cortex, ready to run basically and hide and run away and get small and hide. And that's what it's like in a hypo state. So you can be hypoglycemic and not have diabetes. But I believe as well that constant state of hypoglycemia can lead to dysfunction and an autoimmune illness. So I think that's what happened to me, because I've in my entire life as a child, I've had a insatiable appetite. I could eat mountains of food, and it was commented on. And it was sometimes embarrassing because I would eat thirds and fourths, never putting weight on, ever. But I did run everywhere and exercise. So I believe over the years, as a child, I've just by default managed my dysfunction, if you like. I've just managed hypoglycemia and hyperglycemia through exercise. But I actually believe that I have been type 1 or 1.5 actually, my entire life. But my diagnose, my trigger, I think the trigger was COVID, but that's another discussion. So I was very, very lucky because I did a HB1AC test. And a HB1AC test measures the glucose level in your bloodstream over the last 120 days, 2 to 3 months. So it's your long-term level of glucose in the bloodstream. And it's a test that personally I believe that every adult and every child, every single person on the planet should take. Yeah, it gives you that valuable information of what's going on in your body, and you can then make correction. Without that HB1AC test, you would never know. You would never know. And I was lucky enough to have a test, which is actually readily available, and you can all get tested. And I urge you to all get tested. You have your HB1AC level tested. I took this this test to the doctors. I had a Wellman's check, so I thought, right, I'm over 50. I've never been to doctors before. I'm gonna check myself out. And when he ran further tests, he discovered again, yes, my HB1AC test was 99, and he looked at me and he said these words: "How come you are not severely ill? How come you're?" I said, I have no idea how you're so well. Your liver functions good, your kidneys are good, your cholesterol levels are very, very good. I mean, it's very slightly high. And I'd like to talk about cholesterol levels as well, because I think they're very relevant. I think that having a slightly high cholesterol level is not unhealthy, and I'll explain that in a moment. Everything came back super. My blood pressure was fine. Everything. He said he couldn't work out how everything could be good, but with a HB1AC level of 99. That's how high it was. And we should be between 20 and 40 mmol. And I was 99. And I told him what I was doing. I told him my lifestyle, and I told him the health protocol I was taking. I told him that I was taking a omega-3 balance oil daily. I was taking a prebiotic and a multivitamin alongside a pretty healthy diet. I have a sweet tooth, so I manage that, but my diet on the whole is pretty good. I have very few processed foods in my diet. But he just could not fathom it until he then replied, "What's the omega-3? What's in it?" And I just described it to him. And he said, "Well, having those essential fatty acids in your body, it must be having such an anti-inflammatory effect on your system that it's actually keeping you well. But it's not controlling your blood sugar. So, but it's doing everything else, and it's doing a great job. So don't change, keep going." But then he made a large mistake, and he diagnosed me, knowing my lifestyle, knowing my diet, looking at me. Those that you see me or know me, I'm not a big person. I'm not overweight. I'm not obese. And he diagnosed me as a type 2 diabetic based on my HB1AC result being so high. So he misdiagnosed me as type 2 diabetes. Now, that's not such a bad thing because it led down this path. So I'm kind of grateful in a way that he misdiagnosed me. I'm not grateful for the medication that I took, but I'm not for long. So he just prescribed me on metformin. And metformin can have quite nasty side effects, especially in the digestive system. So it can enforce diarrhea. It's not pleasant, but it made me feel depressed and in really low mood. So I didn't take it. And I went on a self-prescribed diet of high protein, high fat. And then I retested. And the doctor was pretty impressed. He said, oh, the metformin's doing a good job because you've now gone down to 69 mmol 3 months later. And I, with a smile on my face, told him, well, I'm not taking your metformin. Brilliant. Loved his face. So that was great. I got my HB1AC down, but not enough. Not enough. I told him about the metformin, and he said, well, why didn't you tell me? And he said, because I wanted to test diet. So then I switched medication. And I said to him, look, I don't think I'm type 2 anyway. Please, can I go for further tests? And he listened, and I went for further tests. And they showed me to be a type 1.5 diabetic, a hybrid, if you will. It's latent onset diabetes. And it is not common, but it is common enough. It's effectively where your pancreas is still producing some insulin, but not enough. And at some point, it will run out. So with that advice, he then switched me to another medication called glyca something. I'll put in a feed, a glyca something. I can't remember. I should have it in my notes. I've got notes here, by the way. I've got notes, but I haven't used them yet. I wrote it. It took me hours to write these notes. I'm not even using them. Glycoside. Now, glycoside seemed to have no effect whatsoever because my next HB1AC test was not very much lower. And then a decision was made for me to go on to insulin. And I'm on very low amounts of insulin. I take a background insulin once a day at 9 p.m. It lasts 24 hours. And I take between 2 and 4 units of insulin before a meal, on every meal. Now, to give you an idea of how much that is, it's not unusual for somebody with type 1 diabetes to take up to 30 units in one meal. And I take between 2 and 4. So I'm not taking a lot because I'm managing it as well with diet. So my philosophy is, or my approach is, don't spike and shoot my levels up in order for me to have to then control them with insulin. But that is the advice that is going out to people with type 1 and type 2 diabetes. It's okay. Just control, just carb control, and there's calculations for how much insulin, how much carbohydrates you're taking, how many units you're taking in carbs, to how much you take in insulin to combat that and counteract it. Now, there's something majorly wrong with this, but there's also something that's right. Yeah, without that would be super high levels of glucose long-term in our bloodstream, which would be detrimental to health. But what's wrong with that advice is that there is no discussion at all around nutrition. only about carbohydrates. Yeah, only about carb control. Now there lies in a major, major problem, especially for kids who are going to control their diet just by sugars and not by nutrients. So I'm going to touch on that a little bit more because I think it's very, very important, especially what has happened to my boy. He's 11, and I'm going to tie all this together so we can really make sense of how to manage type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So let's go back to type 2. So with type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes and pre-pre, we can step in early and start to completely change the lives of people who not only could get diabetes, but that have diabetes, and make it very easy to manage and very easy to lose weight and very easy to take all the stress off their heart and organs by doing simple things at the beginning of the day and simple things at the end of the day. And making sure that we've got the nutrients in. So big lifestyle changes are not always easy to take. Okay, so when we're talking about controlling carbohydrates, we are looking at really ideally cutting out bread completely. Bread has a slice of bread is I don't know if this means anything to somebody, but it's about 20 grams of carbohydrates, of which half of that, a little bit more, is sugar. So bread is a shot of sugar into the bloodstream. So we can cut out bread, and it doesn't matter if it's wholemeal. It might slow it down very slightly, but the effect is pretty much the same. Because I've tested it with being diabetic, we get a monitor, so we can pretty much test everything we eat. Sourdough, it makes no difference, even if you're getting the high quality sourdough that's made in a baker's properly. Because the sourdough that says sourdough in it on the supermarkets, it's really still a really highly processed technique to make the bread. So bread's a no-no. It really, really is. Then pastas and rice, white rice, all will shoot and spike the glucose level, which we want to avoid. However, if we make a very intelligent little change in our diet, we can slow down that spiking, and it makes a huge difference. Now, I'll tell you what it is, but I don't want you to just think, well, okay, if we do this thing, then I can eat loads and loads of white bread and loads of pasta, because it's not, at the end of the day, it's still not a great diet because it's nutrient devoid. Yeah, there are very few, if any, nutrients. There's fibers in these, but not nutrients. So we want to keep those fairly at a minimal anyway, and we certainly do not want to start the day. That's the key. Do not start, if you have type 2 or type 1 diabetes, do not start the day with cereals or bread or anything high in carbs. Start the day with a little bit more fat and protein, and you won't have that initial spike. And it's that very first spike in the beginning of the day which pretty much stays, and that's the problem. So we can change it all at the beginning of the day, but the secret is, and thank goodness for the discovery or certainly the production of something called xenobiotic. which is a prebiotic, which is made up of 12 dietary fibers. These fibers slow down the breakdown of the release of sugars into the bloodstream. So I take a scoop of prebiotics before every meal. Done. And I've measured it with and without. So I've taken the food without the prebiotic and taken the food with. And when I take it without, I have a sugar spike because my monitor on my arm tells me my glucose level is going up. And when I take the prebiotic, it doesn't spike as high. So that is an absolute godsend. Andrea, yes, hi.
Are you saying prebiotic? Are you saying xenobiotic?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, are you saying you're taking xenobiotic?
Yeah.
Okay, it's just that I know you referenced it as prebiotic. I'm just confirming that.
Yeah, sorry, Angie. Yeah, it's xenobiotic, prebiotic. Yeah. I tell you also what really helps. If you love potatoes, you can boil them, leave them to cool down for 4 or 5 hours, then boil them again, and then leave them to cool down. So you can do it in the fridge, leave the potatoes in the fridge and overnight and then eat them again the next day. So in other words, you've boiled them, they've cooled down. So you boil them, part boil them, cool down, part boil them more, cool down, and then eat them. It creates resistant starch. So it doesn't spike glucose. Now, there's a problem with that. Who on this planet is going to boil potatoes twice, cool down, keep doing it? I've been a coach on nutrition and well-being and fitness and health, and over 30 years. I think I've done over 30,000 hours of coaching, and believe me, nobody is going to make those changes unless they are absolutely they're a top athlete that their life or their living relies on it, or they're super dedicated. Now, I'm not saying that people are lazy. I'm just saying, yeah, the same. Lisa, it's exactly the same with pasta. You can do the same process with pasta. So it creates resistant starch. So my point I'm trying to make is it is possible to do these things, but to do them consistently and maintain these habits is pretty hard because the time it takes to do it, when you can get the same effect with a prebiotic taken before the meal. But I do a little bit of both. So the other important thing, so the two very, very important meals of the day for people with diabetes, type 1 or type 2, because in that respect, it's the same. You know, type 1, blood sugar level goes up, so does type 2, yeah. But type 1 has no insulin dumped from the pancreas to mobilize that glucose into the bloodstream or into the cells and into the muscles, into the working system, right? So that's not happening for a type 1 diabetic. But the less a type 1 diabetic spikes, the more they can control their blood glucose in the first place, the better it is and the healthier they are. Because we're talking about every spike weakens the immune system and causes an inflammatory response. Hence, also taking a high quality omega-3 is really important if you are diabetic, type 1 or type 2, really important. So the other very important thing is the end of the day. So it's the last meal of the day. The first meal of the day is important, and the last meal of the day. Last meal of the day, because overnight, you do not want your glucose level running high through the entire night. Now, if you had a monitor, you would see that potentially that is the case. But it's totally avoided if you don't carb in the evening. Okay. There is less need for carbohydrates in the evening, unless you're planning on having sex all night, of course, for the energy. Then otherwise, no need. Nobody laughed at that. I mean, why would you not laugh at that? Oh, thanks, Di. Thanks for that one. Right. But in all seriousness, yeah, carbo load if you're going for it. But otherwise, absolutely no need. The best time to eat vegetables are carbohydrates, right? Let's not get confused about that. All vegetables, anything without eyes, apart from potatoes, are carbohydrates. All vegetables and fruits are carbs. It's just that pasta and rice and bread have very little nutrient value and high fiber value, but no nutrients. So vegetables are carbs, but they're containing the nutrients. So that's the time to really load up on veg. Have loads of veg at night with protein and fat. And that is going to satiate you and feed the organs overnight, where all organ repair happens in the circadian rhythm between sort of 12 at night and right through to 6 a.m. That's all your body is repairing through that cycle. You don't want to be giving it carbs, of white carbs in the evening, and spiking sugars, and also just giving it empty calories. And it's also making the digestive system work unnecessarily. So those are the two really important bits of advice that I want you to take on board. If you are also wanting to manage weight, yeah. Don't start the day with carbs, sugars, cereals, processed stuff, processed breads, and don't end the day with processed carbs. Lunchtime, hold on, what happens if you replace the normal rice pasta with a cognac product? Cognac product? You might have to come back to you on that, because I don't know what a cognac product is. Konjac. I'll come back. You might have to come on camera and speak to me in a second, so I understand what that is. Okay, so I'm going to interject with a little bit of light-heartedness, and then open the floor for questions, and then we'll come back to a bit more stuff that I want to talk to you about around my son. So I showed you the my number plate, which I had a year and a half before I was diagnosed. Has anybody found anything interesting about it? Did anybody notice? H19CBA. Somebody must have seen something there.
HbA1c.
It's HB1. Yeah, that's it. Now I got that a year and a half before I was diagnosed, and my HB1AC was 99. Now, do you think the universe was trying to tell me something a year and a half before I was diagnosed? I think that's quite interesting. So this is my number plate, which I will put on all my cars. My wife thinks that can't be asked, and I think it can be achieved. So that gives you a bit of an idea of what's going on in our house. So luckily, being armed with this information, I was prepared to what happened 6 months ago. 6 months ago, my son was like just waking up in the morning and just really couldn't be bothered to go to school. And as a parent, it's like, yeah, well, he's 11, right? So it's normal. But Leon is it wasn't there wasn't really that issue. He's pretty good going to school, enjoyed it. It was a new school. Leon's 11. Um, and so we didn't really think much of it. And he's coming home and he's tired. Still didn't think much of it because he does a lot of sport, uh, possible hormonal changes. And then he starts to, weeks later, he's starting to drink a lot of water, more than ever. And I said to my wife, Caroline, something's not right. He's showing symptoms here, diabetes. And so we monitored and watched, and he's peeing in the night. Now he's getting up in the night time. Okay, so he's going for a wee. That's unheard of. So it's like this is serious. We need to get. I need to finger prick testing. Of course, I've got all the kit. I've got all the finger prick testers and everything. So it was perfect. Um, but he was absolutely petrified of needles, petrified because of a bad experience with a pediatric nurse who was also a vampire, I think, and he didn't enjoy that experience whatsoever. So I kind of put it off until I could no longer put it off. Um, he was losing weight. He he looked so drawn. He must have lost a couple of kilos, and it was rapid. And he was. I saw him, and he was skinny and white, and looked. He could barely. And he was starting to really just not be well at all. So we got tested. We did his ketones, and his ketones were through the roof. Um, so I'm kind of hoping also that this will put you off the ketosis diet, which is pushing yourself into this state, which is purely eating. It's a paleo style diet, which, if it's not done correctly, can put you into a very ill state. I'm not saying it's not a healthy diet. I'm saying it's done incorrectly and severely, then it can be. In other words, you're just eating only fats and protein, and it can poison the system. And that's what happens in ketosis. So he was going into diabetic ketosis, and he did go into that, where the blood thickens, he can't breathe, and he's effectively he's dying. So he was in hospital for 4 days. And I had to put him on a drip, and then for 2 days on a drip, and then it's a process when they put insulin in the body. So he's diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 11 years old. And the doctors actually said that it's quite rare to have a father and a son, or two people in the same family with diabetes. But then type 1, which doesn't make sense to me, because you'd think that there was some genetic connection. However, we have Leon now with type 1 diabetes, and we're living with it. He has bad days, mainly around the psychology of it. His alarm goes off at school, and everybody looks at him. He doesn't feel comfortable with it. He doesn't really particularly like the patch. He doesn't like taking a needle injection all the time. You can imagine it's not great. It's not great, but he functions normally, right? He's a normal kid, can do normal things, but we have to manage and count every single thing that he eats, manage it, everything. Because a sustained or high level glucose in the bloodstream long term is dangerous. It's life threatening. But it's life threatening for everyone who's not knowing or not managing it. So it's a silent killer. You could all be living with very high levels of glucose, but living and functioning, but deteriorating long term. Hence, I urge you to do a HB1AC so you know where you are and you can reverse it and change it. So with Leon, this is the most important part. The advice for Leon is, Leon, you can eat whatever you like. Nothing changes. You just have to take the relevant amount of insulin to combat the carbs. That is the advice from Diabetes UK and Diabetes Society. Now, I get the advice because it makes sense, but it doesn't help in the fact that it's an autoimmune disease. So what happens if you have an autoimmune disease is your body's under constant stress and pressure, and it's highly inflammatory. So we have to take into account, how are we going to look after his long-term health? Yes, we can control his blood sugar. That's absolutely fine. But to not have any advice around nutrition is not fine. So how do we get nutrients into an 11-year-old who doesn't like broccoli, who doesn't like beans, green beans that is, like most 11-year-old kids, but he's a pescatarian as well. So he has to take a multivitamin, and he does. Zeno multivitamin, multi-5 he takes 2 a day. He takes a prebiotic and he takes Balance Oil. How do I get that into his body? Dead easy. The Balance Oil goes into a yogurt or a Yakult. He shakes it up and drinks his fillet of fish inside a bottle of Yakult every single day. Box ticked, fantastic, anti-inflammatory in. Then he takes his prebiotic. I actually most of the time throw it into that Yakult, so it's all done in one go. And the multi-5 vitamin tastes great, so he just crunches those. So I know that that boy has got all the nutrients in him. So we can have some leeway on his diet, and we can make his diet, we can normalize stuff for him and make sure that his long-term well-being is secured. And that's in my opinion, that's the missing part of managing type 1 diabetes for children. And do you know what? It's not much different to adults. I've had the same thing, exactly the same thing. The advice is simply counting carbs and matching the carbs with insulin. And do you guys not agree that that is not enough information? Yeah, just carb counting. It's not good enough. So thank goodness that we have these conversations and we can get people thinking about it, because the system, the health system, is reactive to illness. It's not designed and set up for prevention whatsoever. So no doctor is going to do a HB1AC test for you if you're perfectly well. Only if you are showing symptoms of diabetes. And I think we can take health into our own hands and do a test. Like we can do a Balance Oil test as well and find out our inflammatory markers and find out our cellular health. So we have these tools to use and not rely on waiting till we're ill to then be tested. That's the key message that I kind of want to get across tonight. Hopefully I have. It's 10:02. I'm gonna unmute everybody or if everybody can unmute and have any questions, that'd be great. That'd be really, really good. Okay, in fact, I'm gonna look in the chat. Could you do my chat, Sophie?
What do you mean by do your chat?
Is there any questions in that? Oh, I can do it. Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
I can do it. Hold on. Okay.
I don't think there's any particular questions. I think they're just. But Andrew and Di put their hand up, so there's some questions for you, I think.
Okay, far away.
Andrew, do you want to go first?
Mine's more of an observation. I have my son's girlfriend living with us. She will on average sleep 12 hours a day. She was 47 to 1 on her balance test. She takes the whole health protocol. She drinks excessive amount of water, and she'll be doing a blood test straight after this, because you've now pricked my conscience that we're just accepting that's what she does.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the key markers are excessive water drinking and excessive peeing. The reason why we drink water, anybody guess? I think it's almost guessable. The body's intelligent, right? It takes on fluid to flush out the glucose. It's the only way the body can get rid of the glucose in the. So that's why our thirst increases, and then we pee it out. That's the only way. And of course, we can control blood sugar with exercise as well. That's what I was doing. However, it is very difficult to do it on a fat and protein diet. It is possible, but it takes a person weeks for that system to switch to converting fat into fuel and carbs. My system was not switching over. It really wasn't. So I was actually losing weight when I was eating fat, more fat and more protein. I was losing weight because my system simply doesn't manage it at all. Some people's do though. So this isn't generic advice. There's a question here. Sorry, no person has a type 1. Many factors affect my blood sugars, like hormones, heat, stress, not just the food. Yes, Steph. Yeah, this is true. There are many factors. Stress releases cortisol, which releases sugar into bloodstream to mobilize food to run, fight. So yeah, it really does. It's not just food. But when the body is under stress, in organ stress, then it triggers stress hormone anyway. Hence, taking a balance oil as well, taking those essential fatty acids, help counteract that as well. How far in advance from eating do you take xenobiotic? Minutes. Yeah, it seems to just dump on that into that system quite quickly. But yeah, minutes. Take my, I eat it just dry, spoon it down, but it's not everybody's way of doing it. You just mix it with water or juice, or just mix it into any foods, and you can heat it. Not too high temperature, but you can put it in pancakes. I'd mix it with pasta as well if I am having pasta. That's how good it is. So, it's measurable. I mean, you can get a finger prick blood testing kit on Amazon, and test every food. Your finger will look like a pin cushion, but it is doable. You can also get a blood glucose, CGM, isn't it? A monitor on trial from the company's gone out of my head. It will come back. But you can get them on trial for 2 weeks for free. You don't have to, you do have to fill out a form. It is possible to trial them, but they're not cheap to go on all the time. And I don't recommend you become diabetic to get a free one. That's a good thing. It's free on the NHS, by the way, kids. That's a bonus. But there's a lot of waste in diabetes as well, because all the stuff is just throwaway, so there's a lot of waste. So
Steve, Lisa's got a question.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi, Steve. Is there any direct correlation link between ADHD children, adults with diabetes because of their sugar hike? So is there any link? Is there anything that that I know? I don't like to thinking of the stereotype of groups, but because I have a daughter that's ADHD, so, and I know of certain adults that are too. So is there any link that they come on to being diabetics? Do we know? Or
there's information in PubMed that there are links that you can look up.
I need to do a test on her, definitely HbA1c test.
Yeah, that's really the test would be key to find out, straight away.
Yeah.
But you see that it can come on. You don't even have to be diabetic. You can be pre, and now pre would be well, the range is between 20 and 40 mmol. So it's a measurement per milliliter of blood. The amount of glucose is in that. 20 to 40 is the range. But you could be sort of 19s, in the 18s, 19s, which is putting you into pre. And it can just slowly creep up if there's no dietary changes or no changes in lifestyle. So with the link to ADHD, the jury is still out, but there's more and more studies showing that there is.
Okay, so that range there you're saying, Steve, between 20 and 40, is that the idealistic range of what you're saying?
Yeah, 20 and 40. The guidelines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Steve, can you explain about the